Welcome to the overnight edition of From Day One, marching along through the interwebs and Dominion as well. As soon as we get the little C up there, perfect. Art Bell is with us tonight with Jeremy Meander on what else? Good old UFOs. This time, though, Nevada's Roswell instead of New Mexico. So with that, Jeremy Meander and the great immortal Art Bell.
This is Dark Matter with your host, Art Bell. Now, here's Art.
And so, another week of extraterrestrial radio begins. Good evening, everybody. I am Art Bell, and this is Dark Matter. A few little housekeeping measures, I guess, to begin. About 1 million requests for a couple of people, and I don't have immediate access to them. One is Mel Waters of Mel's Hole fame. Mel, if you're out there, we'd love to get an email or a phone call from you or contact my producer, and we'll do it again and get an update. Mel's Hole, well, it was about a man who found a hole in the ground that apparently was endless. Some pretty interesting properties. Also, John Teeter. If John is anywhere near the timeline, John, figure out a way to go to artbell.com, actually, either one of you, and email my producer, Paul Bowman. He's the way to get on the air over here. And we'll see what we can do. So, 2 oldies but goodies. John Teeter, Mel Waters. By the way, you know who I did talk to? Madman Markham. I've got Madman's tentative phone number. All right, in the housekeeping category, inactivity. A lot of emails. I get lots of emails about, what's going on with the show, Art? Geez, at 90 minutes and then it cuts me off and I've got to reconnect. All right, well, there's a reason for it and a way around it. Number one, if you're listening to the program and you're cut off after 90 minutes, that means you didn't touch anything. So what I'm telling you to do is reach out and touch. Turn your volume up or down a little bit sometime during that 90-minute period. Then they begin counting again. You see, it's a sort of man versus machine thing. They know that man can make mistakes. Not machines, right? In other words, you might tune into the channel and then forget for 3 days that you've got your computer downloading and downloading and downloading, so they do that. And it will save you money and save them money because of streaming costs. Bandwidth is money. Have you heard that before? Bandwidth is money. So all you've got to do to prevent it anyway is reach over and touch the volume or something, turn it up or down a hair. Or almost anything you do on the receiver will reset that 90 minutes so you don't get cut off. Hope that helps. Now, the wormhole. The wormhole has been experiencing unusual gravitational effects. What that means, translation, is that our wormhole at artbell.com, which is supposed to reliably send a message over here, actually had some sort of software glitch in it. And of course, you guys pounded the holy you-know-what out of it. And that contributed to its demise, its premature demise. It crashed about 21 times during the last show that I did. So, we now have a new, improved, cannot be crashed.
Careful when you say that, Art.
Roland went to work and wrote code and made a new wormhole, and it really is sweet. And later on tonight, I'm sure we will test its mettle by having you all send a bunch of messages. But I do have faith that this new creation of Keith's, because he's very, very good at what he does, is going to hold up. Anyway, we're going to find out. Now, BlackBerry. See the news today? 4.7 billion, something like that. People who have BlackBerries love them. I know I have an iPhone 5. It's hard to understand why people love them so much. They're businessmen mostly, but they love them. Now it's sold, and they're going to cater to exactly those people, the business people. So even though you heard the news today, if you're one of those guys, I know Bob Crane is, you'd have to rip his BlackBerry out of his cold, dead fingers. So you'll be okay. And then it was really cute. I saw a kid on CNN earlier today, a 3-year-old. And this is sort of an illustration of the times we live in now. A 3-year-old. Little boy, cute as heck. But Mom and Dad had just switched to iOS 7, the new operating system for Apple, and he was crying. I don't like it. I don't want it. Just crying. Doesn't like iOS 7. I'm just getting used to it. I don't know how y'all are doing out there. Looking around the world briefly, Kenyan security forces were in what they said were the final stages of flushing out Islamic extremist terrorists from the shopping mall where so many were killed. There are now, and this is really sad, there are reports that as many as 3 Americans may have been among those who attacked the mall. What? Americans? Really? Iran's new foreign minister is going to join talks with 16 nations trying to rein in the Islamic Republic's nuclear program. That'll be later this week at the UN. Good luck with that. 30 large dolphins beached themselves in Brazil. We'll figure that one out someday. And another government shutdown. Seriously. It's one of the reasons that honest to God, I really don't care very much. I mean, you can't avoid politics entirely. But if there's a reason to do it, it's this. Government shutdown. I almost feel like saying, who the hell cares? You know they'll come right up to the brink and then they'll either shut it down or refund it. You know, it's all about Obamacare, I guess. Selective's DNA high-velocity DNA tagging system may come to a neighborhood near you soon. You can actually see it in action, I think, on the web. It's available in both pistol form and rifle form. It is a new tool that would allow government agencies to prevent criminals from running away or disappearing into a crowd before being arrested. Now, what this little baby does, it's a high-velocity tagging system. They shoot you with it, right? Up to 30 or, say, 40 meters away. They hit you with selected DNA high-velocity pellet. It contains a unique DNA code to ensure the correct person is apprehended later. DNA pellets used by law enforcement officers tag individuals with the unique selected DNA code from a distance. Just wonderful. On contact with the target, the uniquely coded selected DNA solution leaves a synthetic DNA trace mark that will enable the relevant authorities to confirm or eliminate that person from their involvement. So in other words, if you're protesting something, and I guess you're getting out of control or whatever, they hit you with this, and boom, you're DNA tagged like that. Incredible. The times we live in. And I can still hear that poor little 3-year-old crying about iOS 7. I don't want it. In a moment, we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to talk about Roswell, and we're going to talk about the Nevada Roswell. I'm Art Bell, and this is Dark Matter.
I hear the drums echoing tonight. She hears only whispers of something to say.
All right, this is Dark Matter, not some other show, so there's a couple of things I want to note here, and that is it's kind of a different atmosphere. We have either 3 or 4 hours, virtually to do anything we want. It's amazing how much time we have. If you deduct the commercial time, which is extremely minimal, from the totality of the 3 or 4 hour show, you'll find out you're getting a lot of content. So it's kind of like we can take our time and do things at a little or a bit of a leisurely pace. Something I want you to hear. And this is, as you know, well, I guess you know, or you may have heard, that Jesse Marcel Jr. passed recently. A real loss. But I was able to dig up the voice of Jesse Marcel Sr. You know, the guy who actually was there at Roswell. And I thought you'd be interested in a couple of things that he had to say. And it's worth pondering as tonight we delve into what could be a Nevada Roswell, or may have been a Nevada Roswell. Listen very carefully. This is Jesse Marcel Sr. Pretty interesting stuff.
It began in Roswell, New Mexico. Near White Sands and Alamogordo, Roswell was home base for many early tests of atom bombs and guided missiles. Here, also, the practice of military stonewalling may have been perpetrated. The case began when Roswell businessman Dan Wilmot witnessed an amazing object over the town. His son tells the story.
This was their home in July of 1947. It was one summer evening. They were sitting out here. Dad looked up in the west and saw an object that came down and had lights blinking, and it was rather frightening to him, but he said all of a sudden it seemed to rock a little bit and sort of counterbalanced itself, wiggle a little bit, then seemed to settle down and take off at a rapid rate of speed.
The next day, reporters heard that the Air Force had found fragments of the mystery object crashed on a remote ranch northwest of Roswell. Excitement ran high until officials announced it was only a weather balloon. Major Jesse Marcel, in charge of the operation, now tells a far different story.
They took pictures, of course. They had a whole flock of microphones there. They wanted to stop comments from me, but I wasn't at liberty to do that. So all I could do is keep a mouth shut. And General Reagan is the one who discussed or told the newsmen, what it was, and to forget about it. It was nothing more than an observation balloon. Of course, we both knew differently.
Major Marcel had to keep silent because of his strategic position at that time. He was in charge of all security and intelligence on atomic tests in the United States and the Pacific. Marcel retraced his secret recovery operation across the hot New Mexico desert.
We left Roswell perhaps around 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You can see it's flat. It is very difficult. In fact, with just verbal directions, we know where to find it. We had to follow the rancher out there.
The crash site was so remote, it took an entire day to drive there.
The following morning, we went out to spot where the crash was. And what I saw, I couldn't believe there was so much of it. It was scattered over such a vast area. So we proceeded to pick up as much of the debris as we could, loaded in a wagon. We filled that up. It took us a good part of the day to do that, because there's such small fragments that we had to do a lot of thinking. We found a piece of metal about a foot and a half to 2 feet wide and about 2 or 3 feet long. It felt like you had nothing in your hands. It wasn't any thicker than the foil out of a pack of cigarettes. But the thing about that got me is that you couldn't even bend it. You couldn't dent it. Even with a sledgehammer would bounce off it. So I knew that I had never seen anything like that before. And as of now, I don't know what it was.
There is new evidence that the FBI then got into the case with a different cover story. Lawyer Peter Gersten, searching through declassified government documents, came across a mention of the Roswell case.
One of those documents related to an incident in Roswell, New Mexico, which indicated that the object which had crashed was an experimental kite. The FBI investigated the incident and determined that it was terrestrial, that it was from an organization which had been doing research in experimental kites.
What did crash in this desert? A UFO? A weather balloon? A radar-reflecting kite?
It was not anything from this earth that I'm quite sure of.
All right.
Because I was being an intelligence officer, I was familiar with just about all materials used in aircraft and our air travel. This is nothing like that. It could not be. It could not have been.
There you go. That's Major Marcel himself. Interesting to be able to hear his words after all these years, huh? And then one adjoining fact that's pretty interesting. The Roswell incident occurred on July 7th of 47. It was only 3 months later, by order of the National Security Act of 1947, that would be September 19th, 1947, the CIA was created. What a coincidence, huh? All right, coming up now, Jeremy Meter. Jeremy is a Las Vegas, Nevada resident, so he's just over the hill here, who's been interested in the paranormal and ufology since he was very young, so we can probably ask him about the paranormal too. He's part of a group from southern Nevada called the Bigfoot's Pad Paranormal. What a name. He co-founded that in 2003. Jeremy has appeared on numerous media interviews and TV networks like Sci-Fi, History Channel, International Channel, speaks frequently about ufology and the supernatural. In the last few years, Jeremy has been working on a case in northern Nevada involving lots of strange UFO activities. And here is Jeremy Meter. Jeremy, hello.
Yeah, how are you doing today, Art?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing good. Just got done eating dinner around here, actually.
Okay. I didn't interrupt, I hope.
Oh, no, you're good. I actually finished like right before the show began.
Okay. Are you on a cell phone?
Yeah, right now I actually am.
Okay. Do you have a real phone?
No, just this one.
Only that one. What happens if your battery goes dead, Jeremy?
I'm actually plugged into the wall right now.
All right.
Like right next to the computer if I go.
All right. Well, we'll hope for the best. It's hard to know where to begin because I hate to say this, and you know I appear ignorant, but I never heard of the Alien Crash.
Not very many people have, actually.
Oh?
See, where to begin? Well, the Helios UFO crash is kind of a weird sort of event. I actually, when I began researching it, I turned from one UFO crash to two UFO crashes and a UFO landing. I guess people actually get the facts all mixed up and they combine it into one big event. So you're in for a pretty interesting story here today, Art. I know most people find this very fascinating. The stories of men in black. I've actually encountered the men in black in person. There's physical UFO samples that I was given and I picked up from the crash site area. So there's plenty to talk about it.
For those who don't know, how big a town is Ely today?
It's between 2,500 and 4,000, depending on who you talk to and who you ask that week. I think Wikipedia says 3,500, I think. 3,500.
And back at the time of the alleged crash, how big was it?
I think it was pretty much about the same. There's not really much going on there today because compared to back then, pretty much stayed exactly how it was for the most part.
That's not many towns do. That's very unusual. So it's always been kind of just a little town.
Yeah. They pretty much, there's 3 grocery stores, about a handful of gas stations. I don't think there's any really big name brand department stores there. It's kind of just picture small town America. The best way I could compare it is think of the town on Stephen King's It the Clown, to say that, but that's what I compare it to.
Okay. Any history of UFOs at area either prior to or after this event?
Yes. Actually, the Ely area has been full of UFOs even before this happened.
Wow.
I guess it was in 1844 or 1864, I was told. Supposedly a UFO had crashed into farmland out there back then, but I haven't really researched that specific incident that much. But there's also an area over, it's called Duck Creek. It's right over the mountain from Ely. It's probably about a 30-minute, 45-minute drive. There's been long since been stories of UFOs being reported back there. There's there's an area, I guess there's only about 10 or 15 small farms out there. Well, apparently there's UFOs, or they call them strange lights. I just call them UFOs because I'll get into that in a few minutes. But I guess they come out of the Duck Creek area where there's no inhabitants, and these glowing red and purple lights, they come through this canyon, and they ride by these people's houses, and I guess they light the houses up whatever color these are glowing, and I guess there's no sound, they glide, I guess like 6 or 10 feet off the ground, depending on the specific incident, and there's an area called Kalamazoo Road in specific where they're seen, and I haven't seen these lights myself, but I have plenty of stories involving these lights, and one of the UFO stories involving the actual crash comes from this general area. That's where one of the UFOs came from.
All right. You would acknowledge, I'm sure, this is not a really high-profile deal like Roswell was. In other words, not a lot of people know about it at any rate, right?
Not at all.
So then what in the world, how did you get interested in something that nobody's sort of ever heard of before?
Funny story. I was actually doing another radio program back in 2008, and somebody had come on the lines and asked me a story. It was actually a ghost show I was doing. And somebody had called and asked if I'd heard about a UFO crash in northern Nevada, and I had never heard of it. So I went online and I searched it, and I found that basically the only thing you find online is a date and the location, which is Ely. And I got intrigued. I went down to UNLV, which is the big college down here for your listeners that are. I went to the microfilm collection down at UNLV, and the more I started researching, I was finding things that were very strange or didn't exactly add up. Like, the crash date didn't make any sense, because I found basically nothing for the date that they had listed on the internet. Well, I started getting really, really sneaky, and I actually found the original author who posted it in an old magazine called the New Atlantean Journal back in the 70s, 1974 or so. And they had actually directed me, the author of that magazine directed me toward the original researcher that had found it. And we got to talking, and just based on his facts, I actually went to the town of Ely and found there are tons of first-hand witnesses, tons of stories, been to the crash sites and all that. It's interesting. I mean, I don't really have any words to describe how weird the whole situation turned out to be.
With this purported crash, is there actual? I mean, there's amazing stories to go with it. For example, they say there were 16 bodies. Is that correct?
I know of a pretty close number. I know of at least 6 or 8 of them. There's probably more, but I only know about 6 or 8. So I actually
do you know anything about those bodies? In other words, any details from anybody who saw? I mean, if there were bodies, then somebody must have seen them, unless the military got to the site. I'm probably jumping way ahead here, and closed everything off so nobody could see. In other words, how does word come of bodies, whether it be 6 or 16?
Well, this is one of the most amazing parts of the story. I don't know if you want me to tell it all right now or not, but there were stories of civilians. They actually found some of these aliens were living. They got away from the crash site and were wandering around the flatlands and right outside of town. Actually, people were reporting some of these aliens were alive, walking around. So there was some bodies that some aliens had died at the crash site, yes, but there was actually some reports of them actually, I don't want to call it escaping, but they were escaped and were actually wandering right outside of town, probably about 3 miles from people's houses.
Oh my God, these are people that actually reported to you that they saw these creatures?
I actually didn't have any reports of the alien bodies, and then until the Ely Daily Times newspaper they put me in the paper, and I told basically a little bit of my story, and I got probably about between 5 and 10 different callers who didn't know each other, actually told me that they had seen either the dead bodies or the living bodies, or not bodies, but living aliens.
Did they describe them?
Yes. This is another thing that I've never heard before besides maybe Flatwoods. the Flatwoods, West Virginia case was the same year. But anyways, I don't really know how to decide without giving a specific eyewitness story, and then I could get more into it.
Okay. Any description would be very welcome.
Well, I'm going to give you a story real quick, Art, and then I'll get more into the two different types of beings that they reported.
Sure.
Well, the most detailed account of the alien bodies, there was four children. Their ages, I think, 4, 6, 8, and 10. That's all 2 years apart. Two of them were, one was a brother and one was a sister, and the other two were friends. Just like they're friends. They lived at the base of a mountain right outside of town. I don't know if they want me to give away the exact name of the mountain right away, because people are going to go out to the mountain to try to find something. I'll get to that in a little bit. Well, this mountain is literally overlooking the town of Ely. And people live on the base of this mountain. And there's a big, giant boulder in the center of the mountain. And I guess all the townspeople back then and nowadays, they go up to this boulder and they, I guess, hang out. Some people go up there and drink beer, or people go up there and just teenagers hang out and that sort of thing. Well, these kids were up on this mountain. Their house at the base of the mountain. They were deep in this mountain and they were playing. I don't know what they were playing, but I guess they were just playing around. And I guess the sister, I told 3 of them were girls and one was a boy. The boy is now deceased, but the sister was the original one that contacted. I was talking to the sister, and she had told me that while they're playing, her brother was tearing off. He took off running very fast past them. What I guess he was like in the hysterics, crying and running away, and he didn't know what he was running from. Mm-hmm. And the next thing I know, I guess the woman said that one of the other girls took off running and passed her from the same direction this boy had been from. And I guess she said that she had turned around for this big boulder, and on the opposite side of this boulder, she said there was something, she said that they called it Thumper the Rubber Man, is what they originally called it. This was reported.
I'm sorry, again, please. They called it what?
Thumper the Rubber Man. Now, I don't know where that name came from, but it was a robotic-like creature, robotic being. She said that it was either metallic looking, and she said you could see the reflection of the rocks and the trees and this being, I guess its torso, its whole body. She said that it had at least one of the arms was a pincher. I told her like Robbie the Robot, and she said, yeah, kind of like Robbie the Robot. But whatever this thing was, she said it was either walking fast or it was running, but whatever this thing was, it chased all 4 of these kids off the mountain, and they ran into their house. Whatever this creature was actually pacing around their house. And she said that one of...
Now, is this thing large? Tall?
She said that it was about the size of an average man, so about 5 to 6 feet tall. It wasn't...
But with pincers?
She said it had at least one pincher. I said it had it on both hands. I know that she said at least one hand. Okay. But whatever this thing was, I guess they ran into the house, and one of the little girls actually fainted, had to be brought to the hospital eventually sometime throughout the day because she was having problems with breathing and was having heart problems because she got so scared at seeing this thing.
Right.
And apparently they called the police, and the police went out to the house, and they never found whatever the thing was. I guess it had went back into the forest. But here's where the story gets more interesting.
It's already interesting. Hold on a second. It's already interesting enough now. Yeah. You said the police became involved, right?
Yeah, the police showed up on the property.
So perhaps, with luck, there's some sort of police report that was filed?
Well, I went down to the police station and tried to get police reports. They told me that supposedly they couldn't access the reports that were that old, which I don't know if they can or they can't. I know of other researchers that have found older reports than that. But
yeah, a local police station, maybe not. That's an awful long time ago.
Well, apparently...
And so that we're clear, what is the exact date again of the crash, please?
July 7th, 1952, which is 5 years to the date after Roswell.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Same day of the year, huh? July 7th.
Oh, yeah, 5 years later.
Wow. All right, so no police report. Nevertheless, the police were there. One child ended up in the hospital. This is really quite a story. It's quite a story. And how substantiated do you feel, Jeremy, all this is?
I think it's way underlooked, and I think the whole case in general should be talked about more, and more people should know about it than that do already, personally.
Well, based on what I've heard so far, I would agree with you, yes. It sounds like a big incident. When you have creatures, when you have alleged aliens, people scared, the police, hospital involved, it's beginning to get to the point where I'm wondering. Now, I'm sorry to be jumping ahead on you, Jeremy, but I looked all this up on the internet before I had you on because I wanted to see what sort of story I was getting into. And I did find a YouTube piece, which, by the way, I sent to Keith, and it's up on artbell.com if you want to see it right now. And indeed, there's been a local investigation, and when they first looked in the newspaper archives, suspiciously, the day in question's newspaper was missing. All the rest of them were there, but the day in question was missing. Now, they did go to, I guess, some microwave backup or something and found a newspaper for that day, but it didn't reference any UFO crash. Am I right?
Yes, because the actual date is in July, and the internet says that I think it's August 14th or August 12th. It's actually a month before that. So that's why the past investigators that tried to look it up have never found any information, because they haven't been looking at the right date. They've been looking ahead of time.
Oh, my. Okay.
And, sorry, Art.
All right. Have you now gone back and looked at the correct date and looked for anything in the paper at all?
Yes. Actually, the Nevada newspapers, especially Ely, didn't report any sort of incident. If you go to Oregon, Idaho, Washington, or Utah, it did make the front page of many newspapers in those states. Like the government or somebody censored the Ely newspapers and all the ones in those little towns that are around there. Because I don't know why a Nevada paper, especially the town of Ely, would not report that in their paper, but yet Ogden and Salt Lake City would have it in theirs. Because if it makes front page in Salt Lake City 2 or 3 hours away, I'm pretty sure that would have been front page news in Ely, you would think.
All right. Boy, I wish you had a real phone there. It just, cell phones kind of clip things off a little bit, and sometimes it's hard to hear. All right, I'm going to ask you to hold tight for a moment. We're going to take a very quick break, and when we get back, we'll get further into the story, but it certainly is fascinating. I mean, imagine something of this magnitude, many bodies, and a crashed UFO in Ely, right here in Nevada, not far away from where I am now. Well, relatively. All of that, and we're just now talking about it after all these years. You're listening to Dark Matter. You know, this song, I guess I had never heard when I was in Manila, Philippines. I heard it on a radio station, and I went, wow, I really like that. And, of course, I obtained it, and then pretty much listened to it until my ears bled. That's the only way I can get a song out of my head, is to just do it and do it and do it and do it until I see blood. Welcome back. My guest is Jeremy Meter, and he's talking about a UFO crash in Ely, Nevada, right here at home. And it's incredibly fascinating stuff. I mean, really good stuff. But that cell phone connection he's got is absolutely awful. We're going to have to see what we can do to get through it. With regard to the wormhole, let's see. David says, the wormhole's a nice idea, but it says, do not expect a reply. I don't see how a reply is possible. It looks like a one-way street to me, in which case an expectation of a reply is erroneous. It should say replies are not possible. Well, wrong, David. What do you think you just got? That's a reply. So the wormhole, I mean, feel free to test it, folks. Blast it a little bit. Send me messages. Send me questions for Jeremy, and we'll see if it holds up. I'm telling you, last week it collapsed like crazy. Now, he coded all weekend I don't mean he, lost his heartbeat or breathing or anything. He wrote code until we got a new wormhole. And so far, so good. All right, Jeremy, welcome back. Now, question for you, Jeremy. Did my producer ask you if you had a landline phone?
Yeah.
And you answered what?
I actually have my cell phone at the moment.
Yeah, I understand that. When he asked you if you have a landline phone, what did you say?
I just said, because he asked me if I had a neighbor or something, I could go use their phone. I said, no, I didn't.
I see. Okay, well, it's really tough on the air, Jeremy, because what you're saying is really fascinating stuff, and I'm going to try and continue with you here, but it's, cell phones are just not the way to go for an interview. That's why we talk about landline phones. So let's keep going as we can. Anyway, the actual crash site itself, Jeremy, you said it was overlooking the town of Ely. So obviously it's up on a hill, up on a mountain, whatever. Is there
not the actual crash site. That's where the living aliens were reported. The actual crash site's a little bit further away, like on a little bit further down.
All right, look, it's been a long time. I don't think there's a lot to fear from people going out there. Can you tell me where the crash site is specifically?
The actual crash site is outside of the town of Ely. It's close to a town called McGill and another smaller town called Cherry Creek. And the alien beings, this is my theory, they probably came through the mountains or the woods. Because the best way to describe this for you and your listeners is there's flatland, and at the base, these flatlands go all the way to the base of the mountain, and that's where the mountain starts. That's where the forest begins.
Okay.
And there are two crash sites. There's a southern one and a northern one. This is the southern one I'm talking about here. The southern crash site, these alien beings could have walked through the woods. It's not very far away. They could have walked onto this towards the mountain where those kids seen it.
Right.
But
all right. Here's one for you, and I'm sorry. Can you give me actual GPS coordinates?
GPS coordinates?
Yes.
I might be able to. Let me look at my notes really quick.
Okay, I would think through a long period of investigation, you might have marked the actual site with GPS coordinates. And I don't think there's any harm in giving it out on this late date. I mean, it's been so long now, right? 1952. So people want to go and visit, and if people can find something, then hey, why not? It's okay. If you find them, let me know. It's not something I have to have right now. Okay?
Yeah. So I'm trying to find the name of the mountain is called Squaw Peak. And I'm trying to find the name of the specific area where that folder is. I know I have it written in right here. But, yeah, I guess you said the locals just call it Big Rock. This is what my notes say. It's called Big Rock. It's halfway up on Squaw Peak.
And that's actually where the crash site is?
That's where they have seen the alien, the living alien creature I just told you about.
Okay. All right, so that's not the actual crash site.
No, I haven't gotten to the actual crash site.
Okay, don't worry about it, Jeremy. Go ahead and tell the story, and maybe during breaks or whatever, if you can find GPS coordinates, I would love to give it to the audience. Because some people might want to go out there and look around, and they might find something, Jeremy. You get enough people going through an area, you might turn something up.
Well, I know that one of the girls still lives on the base of the mountain, still in the same house. So I was going to say, I don't know if she wants people to be out there, because that's her actual backyard. That's part of it is that they go down low.
Okay, I get it. I wouldn't want it either.
But
go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, did you want me to talk a little bit about the general story before we get deep into specific parts of it?
I do, yes. I do. Go ahead.
All right. Well, I'll give you a generalization of the story, and then we'll get deeper into specific parts as we go along. Well, around 10:30 in the morning on July 7th, 1952, over Ogden, Utah, they had seen some kind of a weird fiery object coming down at I guess he said it was a 180-degree angle coming towards the ground.
Wow.
It was struggling to stay in the air. This was reported as an orange fireball with leaving a blue gaseous-looking cloud of smoke behind. And this object was originally reported in Idaho. I guess it flew over to Utah, and then it went back towards Nevada. And Ely, Nevada is kind of in the northern part of the state, towards the top right corner.
Right.
Well, at the same time, around the same exact time, there were civilian witnesses that reported a green T-shaped object with a gaseous blue smoke trail behind it coming from the Washington and Oregon area.
Wow.
And these two objects are coming towards each other, and the next thing you know, the western eastern object flies over Salt Lake City. Well, Hill Air Force Base, they actually had a tower there, and they reported that they had seen this object. They actually got planes in the air to chase after this object, I guess, is what the Project Blue Book reports say.
Oh, no, wow. This is really full of surprises, Jeremy.
Yeah, Project Blue Book actually has about 10 or 15 pages on this specific incident.
Okay.
Well,
That's good. That's good to know. I had no idea it was documented at all. And here you are coming with all this information, people having sighted the descending objects. Wow.
Well, here's what happened. So there was a B-17 that was flying around Hill Air Force Base doing maneuvers, I guess training of some sort. It doesn't really say, but this B-17 was doing training maneuvers, and the tower told them to go chase after this object. Well, they were going 300 miles per hour, and they came nowhere near this thing. They flew through that gaseous blue cloud I was telling you about, but they could never catch up to it. Well, people over in Montello, Nevada, which is in the top right corner, almost in Idaho and Utah, they reported a giant explosion, and this thing had came down and actually smashed into the ground outside of the town of Montello. It's an area called the Dairy Valley.
Okay.
And nowadays, the small town that was in the Dairy Valley is gone. Montello is the closest town, and only 35 people live there nowadays. So if you plan on ever, I'll talk about the crash site a little bit, but that crash site's actually like a 3-day drive, basically. And then, I guess one of the objects had hit the other one, and one had came down south and was struggling to stay in the air, and it had crashed at the site that's near McGill and Cherry Creek, I was telling you, right by Ely. So this is where the story gets confusing. Is people report that the two crash sites are actually one crash site. And there's something that happened in the 1970s in the town of Root, which is even closer to Ely than the Cherry Creek crash site. But that was a UFO landing. I'll get into that in a little bit.
You know, that's not unusual. I mean, even with Roswell, you've got one crash site, no wait, you've got two, and you've got bodies at another location. So, you know, what you're saying is kind of consistent with the way these things seem to be reported.
Yeah. Well, something interesting I forgot to tell you was the Ogden newspaper from July 8th, 1952, they actually reported that fire had burned 600 acres of land. Wait, I think it was July 8th. Yeah, July 8th. They reported that this fire had burned 600 acres from the northern object. The southern object started a fire, but it wasn't as big. The southern object was reported at 11:30 in the morning, and the northern one was reported around 10:30, 10:45. So they're pretty close between the amount of witnesses.
Right.
The one that had crashed up north was closer to town than the one that was in the south.
And the one that was sighted in Utah, that was at about 10:30 in the morning, right?
Yeah, the military from Hill Air Force Base actually reported that it was at 10:30 in the morning, their time, is when they had initially seen the thing on fire.
Okay. Well, we may have had our own Roswell here.
So
Is that what you conclude? After all your investigation, do you conclude that what happened here in Nevada and Ely was, in fact, a Roswell for Nevada?
Definitely. I have stories of alien bodies from the southern crash site, but the northern one, I don't have any stories of bodies up there.
All right.
But
now, all of this would have been absolutely impossible, it seems to me, to cover up. And according to, the investigation you've done, it hasn't all been covered up. But at some point, and again, I hate to rush ahead, but was all this covered up? Did they come in and, I don't know, quarantine the area like there's been a plane crash or something?
Well, I'll start with the northern crash site started. The northern crash site, actually volunteer firefighters from the town of Montello came up to the crash site, and I guess they had come up to this object. And while they were trying to put out this fire, so they didn't know what it was at first, they were trying to put out this fire, and the military told them to leave, and they quarantined off that area. Well, the southern crash site's a whole different story, because there's railroad tracks and a freeway, Highway 50, I think it is, runs right by where the crash site is. So there were people driving by, and the railroad was driving by with their train cars. So quite a few people seen the southern crash site, or Highway 93, sorry. I just remember that. But yeah, quite a few people drove past that crash site. I guess the most interesting story I found came from a train worker. The Nevada Northern Railway, what the company was called, they used to run trains coming from Bruce, Nevada, which has one of the biggest copper mine pits in the world, called the Robinson Mine. It's been open since the 1800s. Anyways, this train used to bring people to work, used to bring people to school, because it was a remote area, especially at that time. And people relied heavily on this train. Well, I think I went to the Nevada Northern Railway Museum back in May, and they actually have records of every train log pretty much since the company started and when it ended. And the story I'm about to tell you actually found documentation of it at the Railway Museum, and I'll get to that in a minute. But anyway, so this man was riding on a train. I'm not exactly sure if he was an engineer or what he was doing on the train. I never asked him, but he was riding the rails, and he came across a section of the track. The man told me that was torn up like pretzels. The tracks were destroyed. They were thrown all over the place. They're in the nearby creek, in the mountains. He said they were everywhere. But
Torn up like pretzels? Is that what you said?
That's his exact word. He says they were bent like pretzels.
Bent like pretzels. Wow. Yeah. Imagine what it would take to bend a train track. Imagine what it would take.
Oh, yeah. Well, so they managed to stop this train just in the nick of time, I guess. And I guess he said when they stopped the train, they didn't know what had happened to the rails. But I guess if they looked off to your immediate left, up on the face of this mountain, they had seen where this object, he didn't know what it was at this point in time, but the UFO had come from the sky, crashed into the ground, and skidded into the small brush and small trees at the base of the mountain. And he told me that the thing was still smoking. It had just happened. This was around noon, by the way. He said 12 or 12:30, so it had just happened recently. And he said that this object was out into the trees, and I guess whoever was in charge of the train told them to stay put, not to move. Well, some ranchers had come from that Duck Creek area with those ranches I was telling you about, and they had gone out of their ranches, and they were all climbing on top of this UFO and picking up small pieces off the ground and whatnot.
Really?
This is what the man told me, and this is exactly what. So some of the locals stick to this story.
All right. Well, okay. I'm sorry. Again, I'm going back to that YouTube investigation thing. You know, they looked through Ely and talked to the population of Ely as best they could. They couldn't find anybody who could relate the kind of stories you're telling. I mean, my God, if you had climbed on top of a UFO, you, your son, your daughter, your wife, everybody connected with you would have heard that story because you'd be telling it like crazy, so it would be there for generations to come.
Well, the thing about because Ed Pierce is from KOLV News over in Reno was one of the that stories that you're talking about.
Right.
He actually has the 1970s and the 1952 crashes, or the UFO incidents combined into one. And the people he's talking to he's asking about something that happened over in Bruce, Nevada. And I guess the townspeople didn't know nothing about it. And there's a small town called Eureka, which is up in that area. My grandmother lives in Eureka, so you kind of have to get in with the community or know somebody to get information.
All right.
So it took me probably about 3 or 4 trips before they opened up to me and started telling me, because the first couple times I went up there, I was told there was no stories available, that no one had seen anything. But once I started telling them about my grandmother lives up there and I visit there all the time, and showed them I was serious about the whole incident, they started opening up to me about all this.
That's remarkable. Remarkable.
You have to go to all the small towns up there, too, to get information.
So if there were people actually climbing on a UFO, or what was left of it after the crash, then there must have been some descriptions of, I don't know, its shape, its size, its texture, its whatever.
Well, about the people that seen the UFO, I only talked to one woman, because most of the people, they have their lips sealed. They won't tell you anything about their names, because I guess the men in black and the military was there harassing people to get their names. So the few people that know their names, they will not tell you. But anyway, so this man said that there was about between 5 or 10 people climbing on this UFO, and I guess most of them were managed to get away before the military had got there. But I guess the object, he said it was silvery, but he said it looked liquidy, like it was wet. Like whatever the object was, he said it looked like it had water like dripping off it or pouring off it. I don't know exactly what that is, or if it's just moisture from being in the atmosphere or whatever. But he said that it looked liquidy, and it looked very smooth. He said you couldn't see a dent in it, you couldn't see windows. There was no sort of markings on it or anything.
That's an interesting way to describe it. You said smooth and liquidy?
That's the exact term. He said it looked liquidy, almost as if it was wet or it had water pouring down the side of it. But the guy also didn't get out of the train to go walk up to it. But
Can't say I blame him. Mm-hmm.
the woman told me the similar description. She said that when you climbed on it, you would slip and slide, almost as if it was covered in a type of slime. But so where this object had crashed, I'd like to tell you nowadays, there's no plant life or no nothing grows in this area where this thing had hit.
All right, so that the implication of that is you have been on that exact site, yes?
Yes, I actually have a website I made recently, a couple days ago. I actually have pictures of me and my best friend in that here where there's nothing growing, actually.
Crater.
Yeah, it's a crater. It's weird. Look on MapQuest, you could actually see it from the sky.
A crater, okay. Now you're talking, these photographs that you took, you have them?
Yeah, I have them all on saved on my computer. I put some of them up on my website, but if you would like more, I could email them to you right now if you want.
Don't email them to me. Email them to Keith Rowland, webmaster@artbell.com.
All right, I'll send those.
All you've got to do is put webmaster@artbell.com. Okay?
All right.
We would obviously love to see the photographs. I didn't know you had these. That's going to be very helpful.
I also have pictures of the physical evidence I was given, too.
Oh, do you now?
Yeah, I have pictures of magnets sticking to it, and I'd like to tell you, I brought these strange samples to several, between 5 and 7 geologists.
Yes.
And a lot of them worked at the mines in the area, and none of them could tell me what these are.
Okay, back up. You keep surprising me. Now you're saying you have physical samples. So you went up to this area, and how did you get your hands on physical samples of whatever we're talking about here?
Well, originally I had gone to the town of Ruth because that's where I thought the original UFO crash had been from. Where it was at.
Right.
I was given a rock. It looks almost, I don't know if you know what hematite is, but it looks similar to this rock called hematite. I'm holding this in my hand as I'm telling you. And this rock, it's dark color, almost like a dark brown or a black. Almost looks like a lava rock.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like the color of a lava rock. It's smooth and it's magnetized. Like if you put a magnet here, it'll stick to the magnet.
Okay.
I don't try not to put it near electronics, so I don't want to ruin my electronics if I have it, but
Smart move. So this is, you're characterizing it as a rock.
yes, I was told that this is that stuff that was dripping off of the UFO.
Oh.
It's hardened. They collect a sample of it, and it's hardened over time.
Okay.
That's what this is.
You never saw it in any other condition other than hard, right?
I've never seen it in any other condition other than hard, but I was given the same exact rock from the UFO landing site from the 1970s and from the 1952 southern crash site, the same exact rock.
Really? And so this was stuff that was dripping off the side of the craft that then hardened. And
Yes.
To be specific, this was given to you by
A
somebody up
local
there?
historian in the town of Ruth.
A local historian. How did you discover that it had magnetic qualities to it?
The woman actually told me about it when she gave it to me. I guess she was playing around with it before she gave it to us. And this woman had about 5 or 6 of these rocks. She just gave me one of them, and the other one that we found on our own at the crash site.
More and more interesting. Okay. Now, you did say a little while ago, at one point, before the military came, I believe is what you said. So the military did eventually get there, correct?
Yes. Well, anyway, so the people are climbing around on this UFO,
Yes.
And I guess he said after about an hour or two, he said they were sitting in this train. They had no idea what was going on, I guess, at this point in time. Well, he said that eventually several military vehicles, he didn't say exactly what kind of vehicles, but he said that military vehicles of some sort had driven up to the site, and they told everybody to get off of the train for driving them back to Ely. But he didn't exactly say where they were going to take them in Ely. So they took them to Ely, to the police station of all places, and he said they were interrogated by these people. Well, he said they do not know what happened to the train. There's no record of the train ever arriving in Ely or the town of McGill, which is the next big train station going north. And north of that, there's a town called Cobury, and it wasn't ever reported to be there either. So, anyways, I told you we had gone to the Nevada Northern Railway Museum, which is right in the heart of Ely, and we were looking at the old reports from the train conductors and from the engineers and all that. Well, we had found a report that says that a train was going towards McGill coming from Ely. And they said that this train, one boxcar was derailed, this is what the report says. It says nothing about a UFO, but it does say that 48 feet of track was damaged. And the museum, I recall the curator or the head honcho at the museum, Sean Pitt, he was very surprised that this had happened. Because he told me he had never heard of any tracks being damaged in that sort of length, or that he's been there for years and years, and he's never heard of anything similar to that. So anyways, the tracks come in 16-foot sections, and that would be what, like 3 or 4 sections?
Sure.
Something like so 3 or 4 sections of track were damaged.
Bent like pretzels.
And it doesn't say what happened. It causes the same exact word. It says the people were taken off the train by an official. It doesn't say who. This is an official. They were taken off the train and brought back to Ely. Well, it doesn't say where they were brought back to in Ely. They weren't brought back to the train station. And it doesn't say what happened to the train, because in the arrival part of the log, it doesn't say where it arrived. It says when it left. So
I wonder if they were taken back to Ely and put in some sort of auditorium-type atmosphere and instructed that they had just seen nothing.
Well, the guy that was on the train didn't get into detail on what exactly they were questioning about. He just told me that he was questioned, because I started getting kind of scared when I started mentioning that I was going to be up there in a few weeks and I wanted to talk to him. So the guy got kind of scared. But,
Really?
So anyways, we found documentation at the railroad museum basically saying word for word what this guy had told us on the phone related to the UFO crash. So, anyways, I asked the curator at the museum I didn't know. I said, how do you move a train? How do you move a train, or what's the process, though? He said that there's 2 ways. You can either take a giant crane from another train on the track and move it physically, like pick the whole thing up and move it.
Right.
The other way, he said, is that you have to take the train apart into several sections and then transport it that way. Well,
so either way, it would have been a really big deal.
Yeah. So the military ended up closing off that road I was telling you about, the freeway that runs by there. And anyway, so they closed off this highway, and he said that this was from one of the military men that was on the side. He told me they had brought the biggest crane in the county to pick this thing up. It's a pretty big object. They have the biggest crane in the country to pick, or not the country, the county, and didn't exactly say what kind of crane it was or how big it was, but I'm assuming pretty big. I asked him the question about helicopters, if there was a helicopter involved. I guess the helicopters at that point in time weren't like they are nowadays. They weren't good enough to pick the object up and carry it like you could now.
Right.
But, so anyways, I guess they put it on a giant flatbed truck and they drove it south. He didn't exactly say where to the south, but I know Area 51's to the south. I guess maybe they could have brought it there, but...
That would be a logical, that certainly would be a logical place to take it. All right, hold tight. My guest is Jeremy Meter, and he's got an awful lot of information about a crash that didn't happen. Except, of course, it sounds like it really did.
And with that, we will leave Art Bell for this evening. We will pick him up again tomorrow night in the overnight for part 2 about Nevada's Roswell incident. Till then, that brings us to a close for this day here on From Day One. Please like, share, and subscribe. Get us to the goal of 50,000 views, 1,000 subscribers. So Boxy over at Nexters and YouTube will pay attention to us and also those nice red boxes to send to all of you. CoinBase, Ibotta, and Gain.gg, you know the drill on those. Get your freebies, help us out at the same time. And until tomorrow, like one another, be kind to one another. Release the Krakens as we march along here from Day One. Have a great night, enjoy your night's sleep, and we'll see you tomorrow as we march along here from Day One. Again, have a great